He was one of the stars of Kentucky's 4-0 sweep of the GLOBL JAM, and I think we need to go ahead and ask the question, what will Reed Sheppard's role be with the Kentucky Wildcats this season? I think it's going to be a pretty big one.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Reed Sheppard's role with the Kentucky Wildcats this upcoming season. Also going to be discussing Kentucky football's wide receiver duo. I know that I've said it a few times on this show. It could be one of the best in the SEC. I'm actually going to take a look at some of the other duos in the SEC that can compare to Kentucky's and going to discuss where I think the Wildcats duo falls in the conference. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everybody out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you've not subbed on YouTube, please go ahead and do so. If you're listening on podcast, would really appreciate a follow there as well. Third episode in a row that I'm going to remind you guys, I am now writing for Wildcats Today of Sports Illustrated, covering things to do with Kentucky football and basketball. So if you want to head over to wildcatstoday.com, you can see some things that I write about Kentucky basketball as well as Kentucky football throughout this fall and for the future. Really excited about that opportunity. And today, we're actually going to be taking a look at a pair of articles that Andrew Stefaniak and I have written over at wildcatstoday.com, starting with Reed Sheppard. So earlier today, August 16th, Andrew put up an article talking about Reed Sheppard and what his role will be on this upcoming Wildcats team in their upcoming season. Now, I want to make a note here before we dive into this. We've put up an episode already on what Reed Sheppard is as far as a prospect and his potential. We believe here at Locked On Kentucky that he is severely underrated, and we kind of got to see people jump on the Reed Sheppard bandwagon of those who were not already on it during the GLOBL JAM. We got to see Reed Sheppard really impress in a lot of different areas. Just a couple of episodes ago, we did a backcourt preview of the Kentucky Wildcats season. So if you want to go check that out, it's up on our YouTube channel and on the podcast feed. So we've talked about Reed Sheppard, you and I, quite a bit already here on the show. But I want to dive into what Andrew has to say about it. And I agree with a lot of the things that Andrew had to say about the UK potential star, I think, this upcoming season. So what is Reed Sheppard's role? I think it's going to be a very big one for Kentucky. According to Andrew Stefaniak, the entire state will be behind this young man, as his father, Jeff Sheppard, was the MVP of the 1998 Final Four, won 2 national championships at Kentucky. Those hardcore UK fans out there already know that. You're going to be behind this kid all the way through what should be a multiple-year career with the Wildcats. Hopefully, he does not enter the NBA draft after just one season with UK. Sheppard proved during the team's time in Canada that he needs to be on the court at least for 10 minutes this season, if not more. That's what Andrew Stefaniak had to say over at wildcatstoday.com, and I completely agree with him, and I'll take it a step further. Couldn't say further. If you look at what Reed Sheppard was doing in the GLOBL JAM, and we highlighted it recently, statistically he shot 50% from the field. He averaged over, I believe it was 7-8 points per game, and he statistically did everything else right for UK. He had steals, he had blocks, he had rebounds, he led the team in assists at 5.8. This kid statistically dominated across the board at the GLOBL JAM. What did I say about Kentucky's time at Canada that I continue to harp on? I'm not necessarily looking at the statistics from this event, but I really am looking to see if something really jumps out on paper to me. But more than anything, I'm just watching how these kids play and how they communicate and what the chemistry looks like. I think the stats back up a really solid outing despite a poor shooting performance in his first game. I think that when you watch this kid play, he does all of the little things right. Kentucky's got a couple of different players on their roster this year that do that for them. You've got guys like Reed Sheppard, guys like Dawe Thiero, who are just kind of glue guys at their respective positions. I think that these two guys, Thiero and Sheppard, can kind of tween between different spots, but that's a conversation for another time for Thiero. For now, with Sheppard, If you did not get a chance to watch the GLOBL JAM, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to our recaps of those different games, as well as watch the games on YouTube if you can find them, and just watch how Reed Sheppard plays. Just anticipatory on the defensive end. He's very, very smart, I think, in the half court on the offensive side of the ball. He's very calm, collected, like DJ Wagner is consistently throughout those 4 different games. He's not as crazy athletic as some other players on this roster, but I think he has a very high basketball IQ. He's smart, and you can tell that by the way that he plays, and he's able to get a lot of other things done outside of just shooting and playing a little bit of on-ball defense on the other end of the floor. 6'3" is his size, so I think that allows him to play between the 1 and the 2. Andrew Stefaniak and I both agree. We think that Reed Sheppard will back up Antonio Reeves at the shooting guard spot. Again, we did recently a backcourt depth chart episode on the show. If you want to go check that out, YouTube, podcast, wherever you're listening or watching. But Sheppard, I think, has an opportunity at the end of this season. When you look back in terms of how many minutes did all of these guys actually get, Wagner, Dillingham, Sheppard, Reeves, I think that you could legitimately make the case that Reed Sheppard has the ability to finish as point guard number 2 as well as shooting guard number 2, not necessarily in terms of rotation, but in terms of how many minutes he actually logs at both positions collectively. So I'm intrigued to see what Reed Sheppard can do based on his just very, I guess, attentive approach to the game so far as a very young freshman. He is somebody that was the lowest rated at the time. He was the lowest rated pickup in Kentucky basketball's recruiting class. He was a 4-star pickup out of all these different 5-stars. And I don't think a lot of people are leaving him in the dirt because of the fact that he has had a father that's done a lot of things with the Wildcats in years past. But a lot of people were looking at guys like Wagner, obviously, and Dillingham. A lot of people were really excited about those guys, and rightfully so. But I think we need to be paying a little bit more attention to Reed Sheppard. What does he become this year? I think that if we take it a step further past what Andrew said with the 10 minutes, I say 15 to 20, possibly, depending on, again, is he able to rotate in at that point guard spot? I can absolutely see Reed Sheppard going somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes. He deserves that based on the way that he's played thus far. We'll see how he plays throughout practice heading into the season opener. We'll see how different things with Wagner and Dillingham pan out, because I truly do believe Dillingham is able to take a step forward. He just needs a little bit of time. But overall, I want to know what you guys think. Tell me what you think about Reed Sheppard. What does he do for the Wildcats this season? What does this rotation look like? We've been talking a lot about it recently, and soon we're going to dive into the wings and the front court. I'm so excited to get into this season with you guys. Let me know in the YouTube comments below what you think. Also, if you're listening on podcast, at Locked On UK on Twitter, you can check us out over there and let us know what's going on, or at least what your opinions are over there as well. All right, I want to take a dive into some receiver duos in the SEC. Right now, I think that Kentucky football has one of the best receiver duos in the conference, and I want to take a look at some other guys that they could maybe pair up against that you could say either are better or just as good as Kentucky's receiver duo this season. Going to talk about that in just a second. Before we do that, though, want to tell you guys about our friends over at Nutrafol. We talked about these guys yesterday, new sponsor of the show. I just got their products in today. I've got a really, really nice shampoo and then a scalp mask that they sent me that I'm going to be able to try out. I'm very excited to use it. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. You can go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz, identify causes through your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. They support healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, metabolism through whole body health. It works. I actually talked to my mom about this today. She has been a consistent user of Nutrafol, and I did not even know it, and she had some really positive things to say about how consistently she's been able to use it and how she's actually been able to see some results over time, over a span of about 5 to 6 months, and I can absolutely attest to this is a legitimate product, and I can't wait to use it myself. You can take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You can find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel already, I would greatly appreciate that if you went ahead and did so. Trying to get to 6K subs now. That is where we are trying to hit, and I believe we can absolutely do it because we got to 5K pretty quickly. So appreciate everybody that has subscribed and continues to listen every day. Also, if you're listening on podcast, please leave us a review. Let us know what you think about the show, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Would love to hear what you think. Leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star rating as well, if you would. So let's go ahead and get into the SEC wide receiver duos. So we've been talking a little bit on this show recently, now that college football is finally back, or at least it's about to be back. In case you're wondering, we will be counting Iowa's points here in the top right of your screen, or top left of your screen, rather, if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, we have an Iowa point tracker for the Hawkeyes this upcoming season. They need to average 25 points per game so that their offensive coordinator does not get a penalty and a fine and potentially get fired. It'll be even funnier if Kentucky ends up playing them in a bowl game for the third year in a row, which could happen. That's kind of why we're paying attention to it, partially because we're college football fans here and partially because I just think it is really, really funny. But college football is almost back, and so that means we're having some conversations about the Kentucky offense, the defense, what we're thinking about Devin Leary, what we're thinking about this team early on in their schedule. Got some really easy, quote-unquote, games to tackle before you take on Vanderbilt in Week 4. But something I said on yesterday's show that I would like to back up here today, and nobody's really questioned it. I just want to kind of explain myself further because I really do think that Kentucky has one of the best wide receiver duos in the SEC. So last season, if you'll back up with me for a second, Kentucky came into the year excited but cautiously optimistic about their receiver room. I asked Mark Stoops about this at SEC Media Days a year ago, and he said that it may be the most talented receiver room he's ever had at Kentucky. Not necessarily an individual player, but the room. It's the most talented room that he's had during his time with the Wildcats. And Dane Key, Barion Brown, they were big pickups through the 2021 or 2022 recruiting class, rather, I should say. And through the transfer portal, you got a wide receiver transfer from Virginia Tech in Tavion Robinson. All three of those guys are back. And you had the best, I think, freshman wide receiver duo, arguably in the country, last year in Key and Brown. Brown getting over 600 yards receiving, Key getting 519 and 6 tutties. Tavion Robinson being back in this room, I mean, this is just a great core for Devin Leary to throw to. With Liam Cohen as the OC, talked about it yesterday, I think that this offense can go to heights that it's not seen in a hot minute. I'm very, very thrilled about what UK has done on that side of the ball to kind of revamp things as we head into the 2023 season. But I said on yesterday's show, not only were they one of the best last year, one of the best duos, I think as sophomores, they'll be looking to build upon hot starts to their Kentucky careers. WildcatsToday.com if you want to go check out this list that I'll be reading from here today to kind of take a look at some other duos in the SEC that I think are comparable or maybe even better than what Kentucky has up here with Key and Brown. Starting off here, I really am intrigued to see what Ole Miss is as a football team this year. I don't think that their defense is going to be good. And their offense has one of the best running backs in the entire nation. Will they stick with that? Or will they let whatever quarterback they start, it's probably going to be Jackson Dart, will they let whatever quarterback they choose air the ball out a little bit, as Lane Kiffin has been known to do in seasons past? Well, if they do elect to choose, if they elect to do that, they've got a couple of really talented receivers that I think could pop off. Zachary Franklin is the first one I want to discuss here. He had over 3,300 career receiving yards in his 4 years at UTSA, and he transferred into Ole Miss this offseason. He had over 1,000 receiving yards last year with the Roadrunners. Really, really solid receiver. Great production, great experience. He's probably going to be their lead guy. If it's not him, you could also put Trey Harris, who had over 900 receiving yards last year at Louisiana Tech. You could put him here as well to pair up with Zachary Franklin, and then Jordan Watkins, who, if I'm not mistaken, transferred in from Louisville a couple of years ago, and he was the third leading receiver on the team last year. He's actually the leading receiver heading into this year statistically. So you've got 3 different guys there in Franklin, Watkins, and Trey Harris that I think could pair up. You could get two of the 3 there, and I think that you could form one of the best receiver duos in the SEC. Because three of those guys have not proven to be statistically better than Dane Key and Barion Brown in the Southeastern Conference, I think it's difficult to sit here and say, okay, well, they're automatically going to be better. And if you talk about just raw numbers, Kentucky's probably going to throw the ball a little bit more than Ole Miss is this year. And I know what Mark Stoops has said about getting back to running the football, and they've got Ray Davis, and I think they're going to do that. But I think as a whole, Kentucky's probably going to be more offensively. I think they're going to run more plays, and they're going to get more opportunities through both passing and running the football. So that's just my opinion on that. Alabama obviously is going to have players in here. I'm a little concerned about Alabama's passing game this upcoming season. Their lead receiver from a year ago had 670-ish receiving yards. That was Jermaine Burton, transferred in from Georgia. And I would say this duo, if you're going to pair Burton up with somebody, I think it's got to be Malik Benson, who is a 4-star receiver, JUCO prospect, number 1 player in the JUCO ranks, borderline 5-star, by the way. I mean, he was pushing it. And he's got elite speed compared to Jamison Williams, another receiver that Bama's had recently that just had phenomenal speed and great body control. So you've got Jermaine Burton, you've got Malik Benson, Ja'Cory Brooks, who was second on the team in receiving yards last year, had a little over 600 as well. You could slide him in here to pair with Burton or Benson. Again, 3 really good receivers that you could take 2 of the 3 and make a great grouping to go against Kentucky's. But again, I really like the speed and the overall ability of Dane Key and Barion Brown. They showed the ability to get 50-50 balls. They showed the ability to create separation. Brown himself, I think, is a great kick returner as well. We got to see that at multiple points last season. So I think just the potential of Devin Leary combined with both Brown and Key, I think it's really difficult to top this year in the SEC. By the way, I'll just go ahead and say it. LSU is not on here. South Carolina is not on here. Malik Neighbors and Antoine Wells are great receivers in their own rights, but they don't have a better pairing, I think, than Kentucky does in Brown and Key. Texas A&M. This may be. I think if you pair them, if you paired this offensive core up with a more competent coaching staff, and I think that that's fair to say right now, this could be the best receiver room in the SEC and top 5 in the country. Evan Stewart, former 5-star. Anais Smith, coming back from injury, just a blazer, just a burner, both in the kick return game and offensively. Evan Stewart, Anais Smith, I think, is your pairing here. Great duo. I would love to have these receivers. Moose Muhammad also could fall here. All 3 of these receivers are great in their own right. Smith has speed. Stewart has insane body control. Go back and watch that Alabama game. Muhammad has veteran experience, and on top of that, an awesome name in Moose Muhammad. This could be my favorite receiving core in all of college football this year. If they had a competent offense and a quarterback that can consistently get the ball to them under Jimbo Fisher, I think that they would be very fun to watch. But Anais Smith, Evan Stewart, definitely up there with Dane Key and Barion Brown. And then the final grouping I want to get to here, and I think that this is going to be on everybody's list if you're going through receiver duos in the league, Brew McCoy and Squirrel White of Tennessee. You look at what Tennessee's doing on offense right now underneath Josh Heupel, and there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not, without Hendon Hooker, Tennessee can continue to replicate the production that they had just a season ago. With Joe Milton, who's a little bit more inconsistent, I think that you're going to have you're going to have a little bit of a statistical dip here. But Brew McCoy, 667 yards last year, which was second on the team. Squirrel White averaged 16 yards per catch. I mean, those are two really, really good receivers, and I think that they are going to be lifted up because of the passing attack around them and Joe Milton. So if you got any thoughts on that, you can leave that in the YouTube comments below or hit me on the socials. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave it in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.